It's awesome to be in Austin, Texas. I lived here from 2000 to 2003, and it's just such an incredible city, incredible culture, incredible vibe. I'm an Aggie, so for those of you that, yeah. And I see Jason in the back. I see you back there, buddy.
10 gallons of Aggie right there.
But somehow Austin accepted me right out of school. And one of the reasons I wanted to live here was because I love music. And I love the power of music to unify people. And I miss this place a lot. I will tell you like a quick story. So you can imagine graduating with a useless marketing degree in 2000 when the tech bubble popped, trying to find a job here. And so the only way I found a job, and I was bound and determined to not use the Koch network. I wanted to do it on my own. I should have used the Koch network. But I literally was like cold calling, trying to find a job, and I went to this little marketing firm called EQ Strategy here in Austin. And I knocked on the door. There's this great guy. He's like, dude, I'm not hiring. Nobody's hiring, especially with a resume like yours. Like, it's not happening. And but he sat down with me anyway. I told him about my like job experience as a kid. He's like, oh, he must have some work ethic. He's worked every summer, like almost all the way from 15 all the way through college. And I was like, Roger, I know you're not hiring. I will work for free because I'm not going to sit on my ass and like do nothing. And I started getting just like jittery, not doing anything. I was having a lot of fun and partying at night. I wasn't working. And so he called me back like 2 weeks later. He's like, you got the job and I'll pay you like $28,500 a year. But you got a job. And so anyway, that's like, I have so many great memories of Austin, but that's my first like real job in the corporate world after all my internships at Koch. And I just want to say it's badass to be in Austin, Texas. I really love it here. You guys have an incredible community.
We all like Austin too, and we're very happy to have you here with us, Jace. I've known you a little over a decade, and you are the kind of person who likes to build things. I've seen you build Koch Disruptive Technologies. I've seen you build at Stand Together Ventures. This is the first time you've ever written a book, though. And so we are in this interesting moment to write a book like the one you just wrote. I think we are in this moment of great uncertainty, both in the positive and the negative sense. Right? I think there are a lot of people who look to the future and don't know how to project 10 years, don't know how to project 5 years, don't know how to project 3 years. We've got technologies that we never could have dreamed of 2 years ago. And it's completely reshaping industries. It's reshaping the way we live our lives. It's reshaping relationships. At the same time, we are in this moment where a lot of our institutions have lost a lot of their sway. And our institutions are, I think, the source of principles for a lot of people. So a lot of those kind of traditional sources of where people got their principles from have started to wane. So it's interesting in this moment to kind of write a book about principles. Yep. What motivated you to do that? Why now, and why that book?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people are asking, well, this is your dad's 5th book, and this, like, how did you earn the right to like be part of that, you know? And why did you write a book? And I was so excited to be like pulled into the process, and just a little bit on the why we wrote it. We want to help people. It's that simple. And we've learned so much within the business over, 60 some years, through a lot of failures, almost 2 bankruptcies, of when we didn't apply principles, we failed. And when we did, we were able to dig ourselves out of the ditch from those failures and transform ourselves. So, and if you look over the course of history, back to when my father took over the company in 1961, started with the company, it's grown 9,000-fold because of those principles. Like at its most simple form, there's a lot of stories that we talk about in the book, but what is different about Koch? It's the principle-based approach and principle-based management, and how we try to empower people with these principles. So we've had a lot of learnings. We wanted to help our own employees first so we can continue the growth and help them learn from past failure and apply principles so that they can not only transform their own lives as individuals and self-actualize and live great lives, but transform the business and get results over the long term. And we have a lot of stories on the social change side and the philanthropic side. Same principles apply across that. When my father and I have our own personal stories that we share of where we failed and how principles pulled us out of the ditch. So back to the core question of like, why did you guys write this together? Why did you do it? We want to share those principles so other people can transform their lives with them at the most basic level. But to your point on what's going on, like right now, unprecedented uncertainty, disruption with AI at a level we've never seen, divisiveness in our country, all of those, economic uncertainty too. We kind of got lucky with the timing, honestly, because these were just going to be stories that we shared with Koch employees and Stand Together employees. But with my role at Koch, which is, I had been focused on disruptive technologies and trying to invest in and help the most interesting and disruptive founders in the world. That's why I started KDT. But now I'm doing that basically broadly on any kind of partnership across Koch. I'm very externally focused. I'm in market. My job is to build relationships and open new doors and get us into new areas and new flow that we haven't been in before. I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people ask the question, well, like, how did Koch do it? What's the Koch story? And what's your secret sauce? And all of those things. And so people ask for it. That's why we're like, let's make this public, right? And we think we can be helpful with these principles, but we got lucky with the timing. And so like that's why we're more excited than ever. And the last thing I'll say on your question is that you kind of, without principles, what do you have to navigate all of this uncertainty? Some people just can blow with the wind and like whatever the fad or trend is. Our approach is more of like whether you're in like a real shitty time or whether you're in boom times, stay true to these core principles, because that every time we've abandoned them, it's put us in the ditch, right? So we have such pattern analysis on this. These principles really provide that navigation tool to say, no matter where the wind is blowing or how hard it's blowing, like we're going to stay true to these core principles. And they also give you courage. It's hard to have courage when like everything's going against you. And so when you're like, I know what my principles are and I have conviction with them and I have courage to do them, you're going to stay consistent to them.
Yeah, so the principles kind of root you in,
That's right.
when the winds blow this way and that way. Yeah. There's this concept that you guys have talked a lot about like when you look at the long timeline, you see the 9000X. When you're in it though, you're up and you're down.
Yeah.
We'll get into some of the other elements where you've applied the principles on the social change side, across society. But let's stay with the company for a minute, because I'm not sure. So we've got a lot of University of Austin students here. Tell us a little bit about the business. From the outside, I think the general perception is like Koch is this big conglomerate.
Yeah.
You do operate at like a staggering scale across a staggering breadth of different things. How do all these things kind of fit together? And then maybe talk about, this moment of uncertainty, right? Where you're saying, this isn't the first time we've had uncertainty, right? You go back to the first industrial revolution and you didn't see all the jobs that were going to be created. You just saw the ones that were going away, right? And maybe just talk about kind of the evolution of the company.
Okay. So who is Koch and what is Koch? Today, it's a private company based in Wichita, Kansas. We touch the majority of the economy with the various businesses that we're in. A lot of people have a misperception that Koch is in kind of an old industrial company and that's like all we're involved in. It's actually the smaller and smaller portion of, kind of the classic industrial term. part of Koch, and we've really transformed ourselves from being an industrial company to a technology company. Yes, we're in energy, we're in fertilizers, so agriculture, but we're in wood products as well. We're in consumer products like toilet paper and paper towels, glass manufacturing, but also software, ERP software, and technology with like Molex, for example, with connectors and cabling that's making all of this AI stuff work. So we're very, very broad. We touch the majority of the economy. We're in close to 60 countries and over 130,000 employees now. So significant scale. I think the thing that's interesting, if you tie this back to principles, is where Koch started relative to where it is today. And there's so many stories that you could tell within that. But I think one big takeaway to understand the business and why it's grown the way it has is that, so people ask, like, you started as a small Southern Oklahoma crude oil gathering company. And then all the things that I mentioned, all these industries that we're in, how did you get to that? Like, because it doesn't really make sense if you just look at it that way. The simple way I would describe that is one of our 41 principles in the book, and that's having a capabilities focus. So thinking about things from capabilities and what you've demonstrated you're good at doing and adding value to customers, as opposed to thinking that I'm in one industry and I just want to grow market share in that, and that's how I grow. And a lot of company, and being private has a huge advantage to do that, because we don't have analysts down our throat all the time saying, well, you need to focus and you need market share in this industry. And if that were the case, we would have just stayed in energy and tried to grow from X% to Y% and make the analysts happy short term. But we had basically flipped that whole model on its head. And like, we look at the world horizontally instead of vertically by industry. We say, what are the core capabilities that we've demonstrated that customers will pay us for? And keep building on those capabilities, and then point those at industries where maybe we can get in and we can add value. So those capabilities early on were running large physical plants, like refineries and fertilizer plants. It was also trading and logistics. So we were good at pipelines and barges and trucking and moving product from point A to point B. And then we had a lot of engineering kind of frameworks and mindset too. So when you take those three capabilities, starting in energy, we said, okay, where can those capabilities then be applied that we can create value and grow that way? So that's taken us from starting in pipelines, then getting in refineries, like, well, maybe in chemicals we can do that. And then from there, we prove that out, and then, well, maybe fertilizers make sense. And then from there, it's like, well, how'd you get to wood products? You need those core capabilities in wood products too. And so when opportunities come along, you say, can our capabilities add value and bring synergy to a company? Does that make sense to acquire or not? And then along the way, you pick up new capabilities. So on that Georgia Pacific example, we started in really the building product side that we felt very comfortable with, that we could run. We almost didn't get the branded products with it. And we bought that back in 2005, and thank God they made us take the whole thing. Because building products, no one was building anything anymore. And so that was in the red, but the consumer products, which were paper towels and toilet paper, all the necessities that everyone still needs, even in down markets, that was ripping and doing great. So, but the capability that we picked up was consumer products and branding. And then we started taking branding and applying that to fertilizers, so it's that if you have a collection of capabilities and you have multiple businesses or different things you can operate in, then you can have another principle, the Republic of Science, where you share learning across all of these businesses, and then all boats rise with the tide. If you can operate in a way that really is one Koch instead of a bunch of siloed companies. Mm-hmm. So I think, kind of the takeaway and all that, and that the thing that's so different is having that capability bounded lens instead of being industry bounded.
Yeah. And jumping back to that idea that when you're in it, you don't see the 9000x, right? You're too zoomed in. This book, it struck me was, for how much success you've had, what struck me about the way you wrote the book is that this is a book of continuous failure and continuously overcoming those failures and sort of distilling those principles.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty relevant to the moment that we're in, where it's like no one knows what's going to happen, and so the answers are not obvious. And you guys you've clearly learned a lot of painful lessons, and these principles have been distilled from those, but also helped you weather those storms. Can you talk a little bit about failure and the role that it plays for you guys?
If my father were here, would say he's like, I'm damn good at failure, which is a great line, and he says that all the time. But he sees that it's a little bit like a Stoic philosophy. It's like, thank God for those failures, because that's you learn a hell of a lot more from failures than you do from success. And so he talks about that, his personal failures, his business failures, failures in social change, and I have plenty of my own. And maybe I'll like to pick one business for an example of failures that we've had, from a Koch standpoint, but I can share some personal failures through this as well. And just because there's so many younger folks in the room, and you guys are, I'm sure, like looking at what your next job is and your next opportunities, and curious about that. Just to share my personal story, I started in agriculture, and I spent a lot of time. I spent more than a decade in our fertilizer business, but it started when I was 15 years old in the feed yards, cattle feed yards. My first job at Koch was when I was 15 years old, and I had a really bad attitude. And I was a good tennis player, but I wanted to quit, and I wanted to party with my friends. And my dad said, you either give 100% on the tennis court, I'm going to get your ass a job. And I said, get my ass a job then. And I'm done with tennis. And so the next morning, he had me in a pickup truck on the way to Syracuse, Kansas, to go work at one of the largest feed yards in the country. So you can imagine, like, I went from like country club rich kid to shoveling cow shit in 12 hours. And like a lot of people would say, like, wow, how unfortunate for you. All my friends were partying at the country club and doing that thing. But as much as I like really despised him at the time for forcing me to do that, like, he literally, I think, saved my life. Because I have no idea where I'd be had I not like done that. And the reason why, and this gets in, and my dad has his own story on this, but my grandfather wrote a letter to my father. It's crazy, the story. He wrote this letter when my father was 3 months old, 1936, and he put it in his safety deposit box that when he passed away, he wanted my father and his brothers to read. And it went something like this. You're going to get what seems to be a large sum of money, when I pass, and you can do one of two things with it. You can either let it destroy your life and not do anything and be, like a bum with money, or you can apply yourself, and you can use this money to go grow and build and add value to other people's lives. And he said, and if you do that, you will feel the glorious feeling of accomplishment. And that's it. Like, it kind of like, I don't know, it puts the hair on my neck up, because I feel like that feed yard experience that he sent me through did the same for me. Even though it's like, well, you really felt the feeling of accomplishment by digging post holes and shoveling cow shit? But I did, like, because I went from not like feeling that at all most of my life to actually like feeling like I earned something. And I worked with a team, and they took me in, and I proved myself and all of that. So I became more like addicted to that feeling of, no, I don't want to be like a typical third generation, like rich kid. I want to add value, and I want to do something. And so from that point on, like, I worked every summer all the way through junior year in college, across all these manual labor jobs. But so fast forward to like a business failure. So one would look at that as like, well, you failed, you quit tennis, you were like nationally ranked and all, but again, that failure was like a blessing in disguise for the reason I mentioned. But if you fast forward, I had a lot of different jobs when I came back to Koch. Talk about living in Austin. I left in 2003 because I wanted to go back to Koch because I saw such an incredible opportunity to learn from my pop, learn from leaders like Dave Robertson, who's in the audience here, who's co-CEO with my father today, and like go feel the feeling of accomplishment again, and kind of set myself down that path. So I went back into the fertilizer business, different ag feed yard. That's one type of business. We also make nitrogen products and we trade them around the world. I spent 10 years in that business. But in the late 90s, we got ourselves into a lot of trouble because we violated a principle around like experimental discovery, right? We went all in on a vision of trying to control an entire value chain from, we called it the gas to bread spread. And so we were trying to do everything from pull nitrogen out of the ground, turn it into, pull natural gas out of the ground, turn it into nitrogen, apply it to farmers, turn it into wheat and corn, and then also do the consumer product side of it with food. Got into pizza crust, for God's sakes. And ended up on shelves and wondered why we were failing across the whole thing.
This is kind of breaking your rule. Right?
Yeah.
Because you're saying, hey, we're a capabilities-driven company, and then you're just saying, okay, I'm going to go vertically integrate like everybody else. And
with that strategy, we violated all 41 principles in the book. No, because you think about it.
You have to read the book to know how bad they were at this.
So we got one totally violated the capabilities. Like, oh, we can own the whole thing. We can do everything. We can do everything from consumer to pulling natural gas out of the ground to running operations. It's just like when you think back on it, it was crazy. We violated the scientific method, which is disproving your hypothesis as much as you try to prove it. And so we were buying companies through that value chain just to grow without asking like, I wonder if we should do due diligence on these hog contracts that we're buying through Purina, only to realize the day after we close, they're out of the money by several $100 million. I mean, something as simple as driving the scientific method can completely bankrupt you if you don't do that, right? And so that's why it's one of the 41 principles. I mentioned experimental discovery as well. It's try a lot of things, but don't do it in a way that sinks the company if you're wrong, right?
Well, but also learning from those mistakes and kind of just measurement, right? Yeah. Then applying that back into your principles. It wasn't that, you showed up on day one and there were 41 principles, right? You sort of developed these alongside your failures and successes.
No, we picked these 41 not because there's a magic number. So why wouldn't you do 40, a nice round number? So like 40, really? What's that about? These are just the 41 that when we went through all the different learnings and principles, like these were the ones that helped us most.
But every company has like their company principles, right? And they, they're probably posted on the wall somewhere, and maybe they say them once a year at the offsite or what have you. You guys, you take them very seriously, and it is very much like a part of your approach through the management of the company. Like you can see the way it's permeated, and I think that's like a function of culture, right? And you've been able to instill that culture despite operating across vast, industry, like different industries across the world, hundreds of thousands of employees. Talk about how you kind of grow and partner and scale without losing those principles in all that, right? Like when you go buy a company like Purina or a company like Georgia Pacific, which I think at the time was bigger than Koch was, right? It was like the snake eating a giant egg, and you can see it in there, right? Yeah. How do you take on something like that and then come out of it on the other side with like the culture intact, the principles intact? How do you scale that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first on your comment on just culture and how you see a lot of companies that they've got really their value system or whatever, but it's on the wall. But actually, what you do is quite different. And the employees that you hire and other people, they pick up on that like in the first 3 minutes of being on the job, if it's real or if it's not, right? So it's like what my father says about parenthood. If you don't, if you don't lead by example, how the hell do you expect your kids to, right? And so it's the same with leadership and driving a real culture based on values and principles and like living up to that, hiring based on that, firing based on that, incentivizing based on that, promoting people based on those principles. And so like that's the only way you really have a culture and that's sustainable. And I'd say the other thing is one of the really important principles in this that I look at as almost like this overarching principle that all like the other 40 kind of sit under, and that is bottom up versus top down. So here's one way that I've always thought about how to explain like who Koch is and what the secret sauce of the culture is. Like imagine if you had a business where everyone knew what to do without being told. And we don't have that, to be clear. But that is the idea. That's the vision that we're because if you have a principled approach and that you codify it like the way we're trying to, and you continue to innovate that in a way that connects with people, you get the best talent that you can go empower from the bottom up with these principles and let them run. As opposed to the alternative of top down, you got the smartest guy in the room, and you're telling everyone what the strategy would be, and they're waiting to be told what to do. So and there's a lot in between, right? But our vision is to be as bottom up as you possibly can. And that's the only way, like I look at my father, I look at Dave Robertson and how they run the business. It's never about, no, you shouldn't do that strategy, you should do this strategy. It's about, how can I help you succeed? What barriers do you have? Or are you applying the principles? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's the only way Koch has scaled and how the growth that it can operate in 60 countries and can take on new acquisitions, which by the way is very hard because you're buying a different culture and you're trying to plug it into the culture that I'm describing. And I could talk a lot about that, but I think just to your core question about how important like culture is, like ours is like if you can apply a bottom up, if you have clear principles and you can really live by those and lead by example with those and empower people from the bottom up, that's the competitive advantage. Can I say one more thing on this that I think is really important, especially for the younger folks here? Another principle we have is contribution motivated. And so back to like, well, who do you hire and then how do you empower those people that you hire? So much of it is about people selection. And I was actually talking to Carlos about this because he was telling me how they select the students here, and really fascinating. And there's a lot of similarities. We hire, I think this is one of the most different things about Koch and what has led to our success. We hire first on values, second on skills, last on credentials. And most companies flip it upside down. And you start with credentials and who has the 4.0 from the Ivy League school or whatever. And we don't give a damn about that. Like what has gotten results are hiring contribution motivated folks that just come. I call it the farm team. They don't necessarily have to work on the farm, but they come with that mindset of like, I've been working since I was a kid. I'm coming at this with grit and I want to come in and make a contribution. The opposite of that is coming in with a mindset of being deficiency motivated, or even worse, destructively motivated. And that is more coming at things with a victim mindset, an entitled mindset. I have this resume, therefore I'm entitled to this or that. Or coming in and seeking just power and control in a business.
So I think there's sort of this interesting thing about what you're building and how you're building it. There's also kind of something interesting in where you're building it. So we're all in here in Austin. Most people in Austin are in Austin because they want to be in Austin. I think it's a town where I've been here 9 years and people are like, wow, there were people here 9 years ago. But it's also the kind of place that people come to because they want to build, and it's the kind of place that people come to which is sort of like eschewing what is in the echo chambers on the coasts. And so you guys built this massive company. You never left Wichita, Kansas. Talk about the farm team and some of the intrinsic advantages of building out of the fray and not kind of being drawn into kind of the thing of the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and you could invite Joe Lehman up here and talk about what he did with Trilogy and coming to Austin in the very early days because of the talent arbitrage, that was here. It's the same thing that how we view Wichita, Kansas, and we believe there's it's almost like a values arbitrage. And back to like we want access to the best farm team in the world. And we've had so many incentives to leave Wichita and go to all these different markets. And we're like, why would we leave? I mean, this is like the core to our success is having access to the kids that are contribution motivated. And we hire first on values and second on skills. And, we want the best raw material we can get. And we can teach skills on the job. In fact, a lot of like MBAs and business degrees, when we find that we have to unwind that when they come in. No, not UATX, of course. But traditional like MBA type thinking, they're not thinking about the talent model like what I just described. So you have to unwind a lot of that.
Yeah.
So
thinking.
So yeah, and so like Wichita and the Midwest and that type of talent access has been absolutely core to our. And then the trick is if you're a global business, how do you do that on a global level? And that's just through talent selection and having a really high bar. I want to tell one story. You've heard me tell this before, but just to make this really concrete, our CIO today, his name's Jared Benson. Did not have a college degree, and he started 25 years ago by striping lines in Koch's parking lot. And here's a guy that wanted to work at Koch so badly. He was working for some vendor or whatever, and he was doing his projects. But he's like, I want inside that building. And so he had a few friends inside the building that were in the IT group or something. And he said, I can do that. Like, I don't have a college degree, but I can do that. That was back when we were hiring based on resumes and probably throwing out anything below a 3.0 or whatever. But he somehow got in and was running circles around everyone. And then saw years later, he kept getting promoted, bigger and bigger responsibilities. He was a leader and supervisor. And he saw, it was like 10 years ago, this cybersecurity attacks coming, and he saw that we needed to build a capability. He built that up. It saved us from a lot of threats. And when that first cybersecurity wave came, and then from there, earned his way into be CIO of Koch, one of the most important. So like that story alone, that goes back to contribution motivated, but also the talent model that I described. Had we not disrupted our own talent model and thought about that, Jared would never be where he is, and Koch wouldn't be as successful as we are on that. I mean, and so the trick is, how do you do that at scale? How do we have every leader and every supervisor thinking that way? Because we're still trying to disrupt that paradigm internally about stop worrying about the credential.
So let's stay there. Credentials last, right? That is at the bottom of your list of criteria. We are in a room full of education leaders. We've got Lehman over here. Yeah. We got Stacy over here, and we are not just in Austin. We are at the University of Austin, which is, in a very real way, the first kind of true startup mentality university in a century, and I think is very much of that same ethos that like. The credentials and the consensus thinking have kind of stalled, and they've failed us. And there's this sense of wanting to do something different. I'll ask you kind of a provocative question, then maybe we could talk a little bit more about education. Do you think your kids? We both got young kids. Do you think your kids are going to college or not?
It depends on the kid. And I mean that, like, I think my answer to that question speaks to at least how we think about education more broadly, in that we have whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, we have a broken system that is a teach to test model, teacher at the front of the classroom, one size fits all, as opposed to one of thinking about each human, each kid as an individual. And so how do we go from that broken model of one size fits all to one of an individualized education model where every kid can discover their gifts in any means that makes sense for them? And so my answer to your question about my kids would be, Charlie, you just turned 14 years old. I could see him wanting to go really deep on AI. And so maybe that's the university. Maybe he says, look, I can go build a business today, and he's doing an internship right now at Koch. And so he started at Koch before, earlier than I did.
Did you send him to Syracuse?
Yeah, no, I want to. Calvin's going to Syracuse. So I'll get to my second child. And Calvin knows he's going there, by the way. But my 11-year-old, there's no rule he hasn't broken, and he's very disruptive mindset. He might be better just go work, And then Clementine, my youngest, she probably will. I don't know. Those are my predictions today, but who knows what it's going to look like by the time they actually get to that phase. But my approach with them is I'm not telling them they need to go to college. I'm going to say, what's best for you? What's your personal vision? Where are you today? What are you most excited about? And what motivates you to go learn? If it's not college, it's go start a business or go get an internship or go work. Then maybe 4 years down the road, maybe you know what you want to do and then come back to school. But just on this whole education thing, and there's so many, UATX, let me just give UATX its flowers based on what I know about it and my experience today here. I wish UATX existed 26 years ago, when I was in school. I love Texas A&M University, don't get me wrong, but it is a very large institution. And what's different about UATX that I've learned is the student is the customer, not the professors. The student is the customer, and it's about practical, real, project-based learning. I was sitting in a teach-to-test model doing multiple choice tests. That's not motivating, right? At least for me. Some people it is, but not for me. So I look back at whether it's what Joe Lemont's doing in Alpha. I went to a great school in K through 12 as well, one of the best schools in the Midwest, but we weren't doing anything. It was still a teach-to-test model, and I was not motivated in half the subjects. So I think we are now at the most exciting time, and maybe the most important thing that we can do as a country is transform our education system. And it is so ripe. I don't need to tell anyone here, because here we are at one of the most disruptive universities in the country, and I've got Joe Lemont sitting in the front row that's completely transforming K through 12. But for me, and what we're working on with Stand Together and what we're leaning in on, education is the most exciting movement potential that we have, because we've done all the research. We looked at pre-COVID, only 20% of families and parents were open to a different model for their kids. Now, if you look at it post-COVID, since everything was so exposed and how bad it was, 80% are open to a new model. So when that is happening from the ground up, you have to pounce, and you got to take that opportunity and go with it. I look at it as, this from building Trust Ventures. It's do you want Uber or do you want a taxi cab? And if we're still stuck in protectionism world and we want to give out medallions to, a protected class of taxi cab drivers, well, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get poor quality at a high cost. And once Uber came in and disrupted the game, they continue to innovate and they offer better and better. So it's no different in education. And that's why, I don't know. I'm really, really excited about the future of education because of that.
But the work you're doing at Stand Together in partnership with many of the folks in this room, I think is also really important, because like that Uber model, if you just told people about Uber, if you're just like, you're just going to get in this stranger's cab and they're going to drive you somewhere and it's going to get in his car, it's going to be fine. It sounds really scary.
Yeah.
But like what was important about that was you just showed people the kind of the better product, right? And COVID was this moment where people saw how bad it really was, like they weren't seeing it up close. And so I think it's so important to actually build those better models and put them into people's hands, which is really one of the things I think that's so exciting that you're doing a Stand Together. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it, into the conversation for a couple reasons. One, Stand Together, and in particular Stand Together Ventures, has played such a large role in my life, and I think it's just one of the most unbelievable organizations I've ever seen. But in large part, it is that because everything you just said about principles with respect to Koch and this incredibly successful business, I have known you all to apply equally to Stand Together. It's not the typical model where you have, successful business leader makes a bunch of money and then writes checks to put their name on the side of something. It is very, very different. Can you talk about how those principles kind of come over into your societal change work also?
Same principles. And that's the beauty of principles is that they apply to everyone and everything. It can apply to your business. It can apply to if you're running a sports team and you're trying to figure out who's in what position, who you want on the bus, who you don't want on the bus. I play in a band. I apply these principles to my band as well. They go nuts a lot, but I instead of a consensus approach, we have an ownership model approach and accountability and that sort of thing. It applies to your kids. How do you teach your kids? So I see the same thing. So anyway, with Stand Together, all of those principles, so we talked about some of them, bottom-up empowerment. That's like core of what we're trying to do with Stand Together is believe in people, bet on them as the, instead of looking at it from the top down and say their problems to be solved, we look at it as the people that have the problem are actually the source of the solution because they know that problem better than anyone. I tell this story a lot, but it's so powerful, especially for the younger folks here. Like, what do I mean by bottom up and betting on people? We found a guy that battled addiction most of his life. His name was Scott Strode. And he found that the power of exercise plus a mentor was what got him to crack his addiction problem. And then he said, okay, wow, well, maybe I can it worked for me. Maybe I can help others with this. So he was the one in the problem, right? And then he was the source of the solution that said, you know what, the power of exercise plus the power of community and getting people together so they're not alone and other people believe in them and are helping them, maybe I can create something. So he started a gym called the Phoenix. When we met him 9 years ago, he had 3 gyms in Colorado. We supercharged him with capital and principles. And he's gone from being in one state to all 50 states, going from helping a couple thousand people to over 1 million people this year. That's a movement. That's a movement based on bottom-up empowerment, by betting on believing in someone that's in the problem and that they want to go help because they know what helped them. And they have the model to go help people at scale. So we're doing that across as many problems as we can, whether it's kids that are stuck in the juvenile system or criminal justice reform or mental health issues. We're just trying to find Scott Strodes out there. This is not top-down philanthropy. This is bet on people and then let them go build, just like what you do in venture capital.
Well, and I think strikingly similar to what you said that you do at Koch, which is you take this capabilities approach. You're not a toilet paper company. You're not a piping company. You're right. You're saying what are the most valuable things that we can do where we can create continuous cycles of mutual benefit. Yeah. And you're doing that in education by helping push school choice and helping fund new models. You're also doing that in addiction, right? It's these concepts and these principles.
So one more thing I think would be helpful, especially I think it would be helpful to everyone, and this one has transformed my life, is the principle of, and we call it, a lot of the principles, sometimes, we just stole and repackaged from Joseph Schumpeter, creative destruction. You got to disrupt yourself from within before the market does. So that's not something, we just apply it. And it's part of our 41 principles. But one that we learned through failure is one that we coined called preferred partnerships. And so what preferred partnerships are where three things are present. You can have a long-term preferred mutually beneficial partnership when, one, you have an aligned vision in terms of where you're going as a partnership, and it's very clear North Star and well-defined. Two, you have aligned values and how you're going to get there, how you solve problems together, how you capture opportunities. Are you willing to be challenged by me to help improve your decision? Do we have teamwork, humility, intellectual honesty, like all those type of values? And then number three is synergistic capabilities and complementary capabilities. And so if you have complementary capabilities and you and I are a partner, you're good at one thing, I'm good at something else, and the combination of us, 1 + 1 can equal 3 or more, then you have synergy so you can apply that to business, you can apply that to acquisitions, you can apply that to your girlfriend or spouse. Does it meet that test? Are those three things present or not?
Aligned vision,
aligned values, and complementary capabilities. I bring this back to Stand Together because the way we've built partnerships and the way Stand Together has really turned into this national movement is that we have selected partners. My father used to work on, up until 2003, he was in a silo, just working on, just plugging away. And he realized, like, I'm not making the progress that I want. I can't do this alone. And if we really want to drive movements and social change in this country and work on the problems that we're talking about, I need lots of partners, right? So then we created the network effect of Stand. That's why it's called Stand Together. But it's through preferred partnerships, and everything is looked at through that lens: aligned vision, aligned values, and complementary capabilities. And so Joe Lemont's a great example of that. We talked about education and our vision there. We see them as a key long-term preferred partner. Joe Lonsdale, who's chairman of UATX, and I think maybe Drew Oding, his partner. He's also been a partner of Stand Together. I think Drew may be here. Both amazing partners that meet that test where they bring something to the table that we don't have. We bring a Stand Together platform they don't have, and we can go do great stuff together. So I think that it's almost like if you've heard nothing else from this discussion, that model and who you work with and who you don't, boy, is that, and I could go through 100 failures where we screwed that up too.
Well, and you do that in the book. So maybe like a last shameless plug for the book, but one thread that I saw as a real commonality through everything you said is it's about unleashing potential, whether that is on your teams within Koch Industries, whether that is people battling addiction, whether that is students trying to better themselves. It is very much, as your grandpa said it, about that glorious feeling of accomplishment and empowering people to go feel that. I'm gonna end on just a question for you on just a note of optimism. Like, what are you optimistic about? And then we'll open it up for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Or there are folks with microphones who will come and get you. So after this, we'll let the audience chime in.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about a lot of things. I'm worried about a lot of things as well. So I'm not just a glass half full type person. We have significant problems in this country. But the more and more preferred partners coming to the table, that it's so interesting. Like the nature of my role is to be in market and to talk to a lot of different people. And so many people want to look at the world through this right versus left lens, which I think is bullshit and very, very tribal and very toxic. Because what I'm learning is that people that would consider themselves left before that, or far right and conservative, are finding themselves like ideologically homeless. And I stole that term from you. I love it. Because it's like all of that is failing us. And but they're looking for a team. They're looking for a home of, I really just want to help people and do good things. And who are my team and partners to go do that? And so I'm seeing a tidal wave of people Like, I think this is, even though like there's a lot of problems that we're working with, it's creating that opportunity where we can stand together and work together to do amazing things. And you don't need a million people to drive change. You need leadership. You need several leaders that we keep picking on Joe, but look what one leader's doing to disrupt K through 12 and help kids go from failing students to A students because he's solving the motivation gap. So think about that across all these problems and these entrepreneurs and these disruptive opportunities. And now we have one of the most powerful tools in the world, AI, to do it faster and empower more people that have considered themselves at the bottom, that don't have resources. Then now we can democratize knowledge and give them the knowledge of the world in their pocket at incredibly low cost. I mean, that's exciting, right? If you have the right mindset and you're contribution motivated and you want to go make something happen and do something, to add value to the world, we're going to move the right direction.
Amazing. Well, we've got time for one or two questions. Raise your hand right here up front. My neighbor, Tom.
You spoke about the importance of values and principle fit in the hiring process for employees. Did you take that same approach to the acquisition process, especially post-GP? And if so, does it make finding acquisitions that you find attractive difficult?
That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. And that we've walked away from a lot of great businesses where we just thought there's no way we can turn the corner on culture. And so that is factored in. Now, we've also bought business where like it needs a lot of work from a culture standpoint, but we can do it, and we have the talent that we can inject, that we believe in, that can go in and really lead by example and help shift a culture. And I think one of the things we're learning is how to do that more effectively and faster to shrink the cycle time from something like GP that took us 10 years to a handful of years. And hopefully we can continue to improve that, because I mean, what you're asking is going to depend on, can Koch continue to grow effectively? And it all comes down to the answer to that is it depends on how well we apply our principles.
So how do you think about assessing principal fit? If, finding people, hiring on principles first, that's sometimes can be, to me, it's a hard thing to assess. So yes. How do you do that?
Yeah, that is a great question and a hard one. We have a very practical hiring process that is, it's like a 360 review of having, so like if we have a role where we want to hire a sales leader as an example, we would have, call it, 7 to 10 different folks from across Koch interview that person, and we have different techniques. We have one called the SBO process, where we ask them different situations they've been in, what was their behavior in that situation, and what was the outcome. If you go through that process, you learn a lot about how someone thinks, and if it's all about them, if they're really about helping other people, especially if they're a leader. Where do they come from? Was it all of them? Were they out as a salesperson? Were they just trying to go get the next deal? Or did they have a sales team of 20 that they spent all their time empowering 20 people to do a lot more than just them getting the credit, as an example? So we miss a lot, in all humility, but we're trying to get better and better at that, because that's one of the competitive advantages that we feel like we have, back to the whole talent discussion. But I would say, I was on the phone with someone yesterday that's helping us think through how you use artificial intelligence to assess contribution motivation, which is incredibly subjective, right? But we're trying to take all this technology and figure out how do you do that at scale? Because we do. I mean, we operate across 60 countries, but if we can figure out how AI and technology can help us go from, we're operating, let's say it's kind of a score of 5 out of 10 on that one question, and we can enhance that to a 7, the results on that marginal uplift would be absolutely bonkers just on improving that. So it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. But and then the last thing I would say on that is the importance of not only the 360 process on the front end when you're hiring someone, but having that on a continual basis, at least once a year. We try to do it 3 or 4 times a year, where you're constantly getting feedback, not only from the peers in the business, but their customers, their suppliers, and what they're like to work with. And then we follow that up with rewarding people, not only on the results of the business this year, because if you're just focused on short-term results, I mean, guess what? They're gonna focus on what got them those short-term results that year, as opposed to investing for year 3, 4, and 5. And so we incentivize based on, yes, short-term results, but also what are they doing to innovate and transform long-term? But most importantly, what are they doing? Are they accretive to the culture, or are they subtractive from the culture? And that's a big lever in terms of overall compensation at the end of the day. So 360 approach on the front end, throughout the year, at the end of the year, it's ongoing. And like that's how you get feedback. And like I would encourage you guys here at UATX too, like ask your professors, ask your peers, ask anyone around you, how am I doing? What do you think? What do you think my comparative advantage is? What's my gift? What are my skills? Because maybe I have a blind side. Maybe I think it's one thing, but everyone else thinks it's something else. That feedback is absolutely gold. So more than you wanted, but that's the practical, like how we do it inside the business. And frankly, we do it across 1,300 employees within our philanthropy as well. Again, these principles apply to everything.
Amazing. Well, let's thank Chase.
Thank you guys.